Is he having a good crisis, as it were?
He is. He is. He's managed this crisis quite well. You know, he's exceeded expectations. Initially, people were feeling rather despondent that he was too slow, but he has to consult. That's the natural state of play in this country. But after he had his consultations, he met with his cabinet. The ball started rolling pretty fast, and people have been impressed. There's a sense that he's in charge, and he's managing this well with his health minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, himself a former member of the ANC's top six. So yeah, he's having a pretty good one.
Tofe, things are different in Nigeria in the sense that there's not the quantum of cases that have been reported. Just yesterday, a swathe of new measures have been announced by the government. It seems that many Nigerians have been up in arms at the slowness of the response. Does now what the government has done? Does this push it in a new direction? Are people more hopeful?
Hi, Nick. I think that people are still quite disappointed in how the national government has handled it and how the president hasn't. Well, he has addressed the nation now once, but today there was a report on Punch with Femi Adesina, his media advisor, saying it's not in his style to address his citizens, that he lets other people do it. So I think people are quite upset about that. And leaders have different leadership styles, and his style is not to address his citizens directly. But different state governments are doing things. In Lagos, every day we do wake up to new measures. I guess Lagos does have the most number of cases. As of yesterday evening, we have 44 confirmed cases. At the same time, people are quite worried that we've only tested around 100 and something people. So then the number is probably not the correct number, actually. That said, today, as of yesterday in Lagos, most markets have got shut down. Only essential markets are still open. Most businesses aren't allowed to continue running. Shops are closed. Social gatherings are not being held anymore. Religious gatherings have been stopped. So we are seeing the government being more proactive, which is a relief. But that is in Lagos State. In different states are doing different things because the federal government haven't really brought us together to have one solution. So in different states, different things are being done.
One of the things that came out of the Ebola crisis of 2015, 2016 was the response that health officials in Lagos were praised for. That body, I think it's the
the NCDC.
The NCDC, that's right, has now received more funding and more powers. What's the thinking behind how this will bend the curve?
The NCDC has been doing very well with keeping us updated on how many cases and what's being done. People are worried that for Ebola, we didn't have as many cases, so it was not easier, but to contain it in the facilities that we do have. People are worried that we don't have enough facilities, and even with extra funding, there isn't enough time to make these facilities before the coronavirus spreads. The NCDC has actually, it seems, turned to trying to scare people into staying at home. There was on their Instagram a meme that basically said if you don't stay 2 meters apart, you're going to end up 6 feet under the ground, which was quite a harsh way.
That's brutal, yeah.
Yeah, a very harsh way of putting it. But they have been very good with keeping people updated and trying to encourage people to wash your hands, use sanitizer, practice social distancing. So with the NCDC, they did tackle Ebola well, and people are hopeful that they will be able to tackle coronavirus as well. But with the spread of this virus, it seems to be getting a lot more people than Ebola did. So that's the worry.
6 feet apart or 6 feet under. That's pretty good.
It was very brutal.
The borders are closed now, but we still get reports of private planes, private jets coming in and out. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. So the borders have been officially shut even to our citizens that are still abroad, but there have been private jets going in and out of the country. Most of them are rumored to be politicians. I do know some contacts where the politician bosses have flown them out to London to do work there. So that is worrying, that it seems that although they've closed the borders, they've only closed it to the masses as opposed to everyone, because coronavirus can get to everyone. So it doesn't really help to half close the borders, I guess. But that is what has been done. Private planes are still going in and out of the country.
Anne-Marie, a keen observer of Egypt that you are, what has been the response there? Because obviously an autocratic government, in China, what we saw was repression of whistleblowers, and to be fair, when the response came, they used the power of a super centralized and autocratic state very well. But nevertheless, for a month or two before they really confronted it, there was suppression of information. Are we seeing this in Egypt or in other North African countries?
We are seeing it quite a lot and very strongly in Egypt. As you were saying, autocratic countries, they of course quite have a heavy hand in affairs, and it can kind of a make it or break it situation when it comes to scenarios like this. In the case of Egypt, there's been a few arrests of people who have tried to counteract the official figure of confirmed corona cases. Early March, there were about 4 cases, according to the Ministry of Health and Population. A study, actually, that was put out by the University of Toronto, that was then quoted by The Guardian, actually, said, in fact, the figures are more like between 6,000 on a good number up to over 19,000. So that, of course, got the journalist kicked out. So you're having this huge discrepancy, but a lot of the action actually stems from what is its biggest economic dependence or contributor is tourism. So you had a lot of the popular Nile cruises going on from Luxor to Aswan with foreign nationals who were entering the country without any testing, going back without any testing because everyone thought it was fine. And then the outbreak actually started to become more apparent. And then authorities had to sort of crack down and then introduce measures. And then that's really where the eruption, you could say, has been officially marked.
I mean, Cairo, the flow of traffic into and out of Cairo every single day is, one of the great migrations, one of the great daily migrations in human history. Has that been curtailed? Have they got all the cars off the streets?
They have suspended all air traffic as of Thursday last week. And as of Wednesday this week, the Prime Minister and also the President, they both announced measures, including a nighttime curfew to take effect as of Wednesday for 2 weeks or 15 days from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now you can imagine in a country quite like Nigeria where it's extremely density ridden, it's going to be hard to do that. You have huge markets everywhere, a lot of people working on the street, trying to unofficially on the street. So I'm not too sure how they're going to curtail that. But as going back to the first point, yes, it's an autocratic country. So when they want people off the street, they get them off the street. But what I've been hearing is that a lot of the closures are official, but you go behind the closed door and you still find people.
Patrick, I mean, we mentioned China as the response that China had to the virus. We've seen it now pivot from managing its own internal crisis towards a sort of a soft power moment. We have Jack Ma distributing masks around the world, particularly in Africa. What are the geopolitics of coronavirus telling us at the moment?
Well, as you say, China is moving into this vacuum, and the vacuum is really due to the disparate responses in Europe, where they locked down the borders, even within the European Union. They ended free movement, and there was an emergency firstly in Italy, and shortages of ventilators and protective equipment, and the other European countries didn't rush to help Italy. So China moved in and started supplying that medical equipment to Italy. They're doing the same in Spain. They're doing the same in Greece. And with some delay, the other European countries, the richer European countries like France and Germany, are moving in. But there's been a lot of infighting across the European Union about how to respond to the pandemic, both in terms of the distribution of medical equipment, but also in terms of the finances, and whether the European Union should share the burden of this, which means essentially the richer countries like Germany and France and the Netherlands should chip in with big amounts of money to help the poorer countries of the South who are most hit, Spain, Portugal, and Italy particularly. And there's a real concern about the stability of the Italian financial system. So you've got that issue going on in Europe, and then right across the Atlantic, the traditional ally of Europe, the US is absolutely disinterested in doing anything in Europe, other than sort of cursory chats between Donald Trump and the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. The international response from the US has been pretty hostile to China. I mean, there has been this naming of the coronavirus as the Wuhan virus, or Chinese virus, as Trump has called it on several occasions. In recent days, he's been advised by his officials, it seems, to desist from that. And the wires are reporting today that he had some sort of one-to-one call with Xi Jinping earlier in the week, and they've sort of exactly haven't kissed, or even virtually kissed, or perhaps socially distanced,
very, very
in a more
amiable
way, and made up a little bit. And he said what a tough time China has had. But there's absolutely no doubt that his response has been confused, and I think it goes into a quite a confused response across the populist political spectrum. People like Trump, people like Bolsonaro in Brazil, even people like Putin, first of all, moved from sort of denialism about what was going on. This isn't really any great concern. So then seeing that it is a huge, great concern, and they have to react. And so what you've got now is Trump on the television every night, talking about all that they're doing, despite being contradicted by his own medical, but the health system in America, which says there are crises certainly in New York, and looming crises in places like Washington State in the West, and so on. So all of that shows a fairly sort of dysfunctional international system, and further sort of cleavages in the multilateral system, which means that those countries outside those axes are really on their own. And I think that was that was shown pretty starkly yesterday, on Thursday, the 26th, by this virtual meeting of the G20, the group of 20 biggest economies in the world. The fact that it was hosted by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, whose contribution to the economic response